Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making a box frame. Now, box frames are used when you have something to display on your wall that is thicker than a photo, a much thicker item that sits inside the frame. And today we have these. And these are Lego minifigures that are in the shape of the Muppets. They were released quite some time ago, and I thought it would be fun to make a box frame for these. So that's what we're going to concentrate on today. And it all starts off with a little bit of hardboard. Well, the first thing that you need to do for any box frame build is you need to determine the dimensions of the frame. So you want to lay out the pieces that you want to display to get a rough idea of what space you're going to need. And for me, I'm going to need a frame that is 13 by 14 inches, or at least that will be the mat. Because what I want to do is I want to frame them in such a way so that they are kind of in the configuration and framed like the original Muppet Show, that classic opening that so many of us grew up on. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of 1/4-inch hardboard and I have marked and cut out all of the openings to house all 12 characters. But the thing is that each of them need a platform to sit on. You can't just sit them in the frame like this. So you need to determine how thick or how deep that frame is. So by measuring the height here while they're lying on their backs, I've determined that each piece is going to need at least 2 inches inside the frame. So what I've done is I've cut some hardboard that is 12 inches long and 2 1/8 inches wide. It's a 1/4 inch thick. So I've cut a shelf for each one of our openings. And what I need to do is in our background, I want to cut a 1/8 inch deep, 1/4 inch wide dado right underneath each one of these openings to be able to house our little shelf. So with those dados cut, that will be our platforms for our minifigures to sit on. The dado's a little more loose than what I would like it to be, but you know what, that's okay. It's going to be glued in place and supported on the sides anyway. So what we need to do now is we don't want the minifigures to move. So again, this is for this custom installation, but each one is on this little base plate. And this base plate measures 15/16 by 1 1/4. So at each one of these window locations in our hardboard here, we are going to place an 1 1/4 wide dado right in the middle of each one of the window openings. And I'll get those cut. We're just going to do it over the table saw, and I'll see you when we get those done. Well, with all those dados cut, it's now time to glue in our shelves. And what I've done is I've cut 1/2 inch wide dado right in the middle, and I've cut some 45-degree angle brackets here just to support this little shelf and to help us glue it in to make it square to our mat board. So I'm going to get these glued up, centered on our board here, and after that there's some painting to do, but this is going to be the main basis for what our frame is based upon. This is our core. And once those shelves are glued in, you end up with something like this. And this is now the mat and the core of our entire box frame. Everything now revolves around this and the size of it, the depth, the height, the width. So what I'm going to do now is we need to make the decorations for the front to make this thing look like the original Muppet Show opening. And for that, I think we're going to start with a little bit of scroll work and some 1/2 inch diameter dowels. Now for the next step, in order to get some of the front decorations, I've cut some of these simple brackets on the scroll saw, and as well I have a piece of 1/2 inch diameter dowel that's 2 inches long, and then a little square of maple here, 1/2 inch by 5/8 by 1 inch thick, And I'm just going to glue these together like this. And they will end up being our center pillars in between each of our dividers. So I'm going to glue up all of these pillars. We're not going to glue them on just yet because there is some painting and stuff to do, but we can at least get all of our pillars assembled. And once they're dried up, you should have something that looks like this. Now, there is still a little bit of trim to do. These are not glued in, and they won't be as they need to be painted, but we will add the trim, and I'll show you what I have in mind for that. Well, in order to make the trim that I'm talking about, I have taken this piece of pine. It's just a scrap piece, 1/2 inch thick, and I have picked a fancier router bit out of my collection and routed a profile on both sides of the board. I will now take this over to the table saw, and I'm going to rip this into a 1/2 inch length. And let me show you what you end up with at that point in time. And what you end up with is 3 pieces of trim that will just sit here at the base of each section, just like this, and then our pillars will get mounted on top, just like that. Not too bad, eh? Well, at this point, there's quite a bit of painting to do on this. I don't think we need a video because it is specific to this application. It is specific to this project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of this painted up, but for now, we're going to move on to the frame itself. Well, for the main box frame, I have milled some 3/4 inch cherry, and I have cut it to a width of 3 1/4 inches. I have then, on the inside face, I have cut a 1/4 inch deep by 3 inch wide rabbet all the way along the face. And that was just cut at the table saw. The rabbet is going to house the inner workings of whatever it is that you're framing. In this case, that Muppet Theater kind of mat that we've constructed. So what you need to do is calculate the thickness of how much room you need to display your piece, plus your backboard, plus your glass. Don't forget to calculate your glass in the mixture, and that will give you the depth, or the width here rather, of your rabbet. So at this point now, I'm going to take these pieces over to the table saw, and using our sled, our table saw sled that we made here on the show not too long ago, I am going to cut a box that will house our Muppet Theater. And when I get those pieces all cut, we will do a dry fit of our final frame. And in checking with the dry fit, it looks like everything is going to be just fine. I have plenty of room for a piece of glass across the front. The backer board fits nicely. It's just a little shy of being flush of the back. The miters look good. So at this point now, I can glue this frame together. Once that is dry, then we can move on to the next step. But you can see how beefy this frame is, 3 1/4 inches, hence why it's called a box frame. So let's get this glued together. Well, it's been a week since I clamped this up, and the frame is completely dry. And even though this has way more glue surface area than what a conventional frame would have, I still want to put some strengthening and decorative splines in each one of these corners. So I'm just going to take it over to the table saw, and using our shop-made spline jig, I'm going to cut the 1/4 inch wide slots needed to house our splines. We can then glue them in place, let them completely dry, flush cut them, and then give our entire frame a really good sanding all over. Well, with the frame all sanded up and the splines all finished, there's nothing really more to do to this part of the build other than to apply the finish. So while the finish is drying, we're going to turn our attention back to our mat, or our platform, or our stage, or whatever you want to call it. So let's head over to the bench, and I'll show you how we're going to take this for a little bit of a twist. Now what I have is a set of just dollar store LED Christmas lights. And what I'm going to do, I've just had them taped in place here just to do some testing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my glue gun and I am going to glue these lights all in place here, all on the inside of our mat. I'll get that done, and then once I get that finished, really all that's left once the finish on the frame itself is dry is to do the final assembly. Well, the finish is completely dry and now it's time for the assembly. And the very first thing that you want to do is you want to get this glass as clean as possible. I've got some 2mm thick plate glass here, and we're just going to get all of the fingerprints and dust off of it, get it as clean as possible. I will caution you that freshly cut plate glass is like a razor blade on the edges, so be very, very careful how you're handling this. And once you're happy with how clean your glass is, you can gently place it inside your frame. Now, I already have my brass photo turns in place here, as well as the sawtooth hanger. That way I'm not having to create dust once I get this all put together. So there we go, just like that. Now, I'm wearing gloves. You obviously don't have to, but it will go a long way to alleviating some frustration, because there is nothing more frustrating than installing a piece of glass, getting the box frame all put together, only to discover that you've placed fingerprints on the inside. All right, the next step here is I have cut a couple of 1/8 inch thick strips of cherry. I applied a finish to them while I was applying the finish to the frame, and they are going to get put in place just with double-sided tape right inside the upper lips here of both sides of our frame. This is going to serve two purposes. It's going to hold our glass in place, and as well, it's going to act as a spacer to keep our matte board from pressing up against that glass. It's going to give a little tiny bit of an air gap there so that we don't have any of our painted surfaces against the glass surface itself. Well, I've used double-sided tape to secure all of my characters in place. I don't want them sliding around. So we can just take our entire mat board and gently place it in on top of those spacers, just like that. Now our light control here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to glue a little spacer block here to keep it from sliding. But the only thing that's left to do now is to place our backer board in its place, slide our photo turns here to hold everything securely. And when I get that done, I'll show you what I've got. And when it's all said and done, this is what you end up with. And I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I love the overall look of it. Now I've placed a finger hole here right in the side. You can see it there. That is for reaching in with your finger and flicking on the lights. Guys, this is quite possibly the most spectacular frame I have ever made. This is absolutely awesome. I love this. Okay. Enough of my ecstasy with this frame. Oh, guys, you gotta try this. This is fantastic. And there you have it. A box display frame. Guys, this here, you have no idea how happy this makes me. I am, and it's widely known, it's no secret, I'm a big kid at heart. I love Lego, I love the Muppets, and the fact that they were combined into one unit, as soon as they released, I had to have them, and then I was able to combine one of my other loves, woodworking, and make this awesome display frame. Now, this took 2 full weekends between the the HVLP spraying of the paints and the varnishes, and just trying to come up with the overall design as to how I wanted it to look and how I wanted it to function. It took quite a bit of thought, but the point is that I took the time and I took the initiative to do that thought and to make the project. Today's show is not about necessarily making a Muppet Show display case. What this is all about is, if you have something that makes you happy, if you have something that you like to look at, whether it be a childhood toy, or maybe it's one of your grandfather's old war medals, or something to that effect. Anything that brings back memories for you or that is worth displaying to you. The whole point of today's show is to demonstrate to you that it doesn't take a lot of work. It takes time and thought, but it doesn't take a lot of work with the skill set that we share for you to make one heck of a gorgeous display frame for that. Whether it be a war medal or whether it be an old teacup that your grandmother used to use, it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you take your skill set and you apply it to your needs. And in this case, I really needed a Muppet display frame. This thing makes me so happy. It's awesome. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. This one's been a lot of fun for me. I really enjoy the flyby of the seat of your pants builds, where I kind of get to let the project develop as I go. Making a frame is really no big deal. The 45s and, putting it together with the clamps and the splines to give it the strength. Where this thing really shone was doing that matte board inside to sort of mimic the Muppet Show opening. That's where all the fun was, and choosing the colors to paint those backboards and really making things come alive. And then those lights, oh my gosh, for $1.50, that was the best $1.50 I ever spent because it looks so awesome. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week, even if it was just to watch me be goofy and have a bit of fun. I hope you've enjoyed today's show, guys. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. You click that bell and then you're not going to miss the notifications of future goofiness. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's content. I hope you're going to try this for yourself, because honestly, it's a great way to display anything that makes you happy. And I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.